I was born in Porndorf, Germany, the 14th of January, 1925. My dad came to the United States before I was born, and my mother stayed in Germany until I was at least 6 months old, because we come over on a boat. I don't remember it, but she says I was good and I didn't cry too much. My brother and sister were with me when we came over, and we landed in Ellis Island, and I don't know how long we stayed there because I was just a little baby and I wasn't too interested. And then we went from Ellis Island, we went to West Haven, Connecticut, where her sister lived, and so that's where we settled, in West Haven. My dad had come over here, and he got a job as a house painter.
What are your memories of growing up in West Haven?
Well, not too much, because I was just a little kid. And then we moved from West Haven, we moved to Hamden, and then we moved to New Haven. But before we moved to New Haven, my mother divorced my dad because he came home half soused half the time, because he would spend the time at the German American Club on the turnpike there, and then he'd come home, and I guess he abused her, because I don't remember my mother hitting him, but they said that she hit him and he went through the wall down the cellar steps, and I guess he didn't get hurt too bad because he didn't have any broken bones or anything.
Right.
I think he was too soused up in the beer. I started grade school in New Haven. I went to Sacred Heart School for 8 years. And then when I got out of grade school, I went to high school, which New Haven Hill House High School in New Haven. And then when the war started, I was told before the war started that I would be repeating my junior year in high school because I had flunked U.S. history the second week of school. The book that we studied out of was written by the fellow that taught, and he gave us an assignment to do, and I didn't think I had to know word for word, so I didn't do it. And then when he asked me why I didn't do it, I said, well, just because you wrote the book doesn't mean I have to learn it. And I spent 4 or 5 weeks, months in the back of the room, got no credit for U.S. history. So I decided, when I turned 16, well, I don't want to go to school no more. And then when the war started, I got my mother to sign for me. I was at watching a movie theater at the old Howard Theater on Howard Avenue. And when the war started, they announced that Japan had just bombed Pearl Harbor. So naturally everybody was hooting and hollering. And the next day we went down to the recruiting station, and I wasn't old enough, so I went with a couple other guys that were 17, and their folks signed for them. And I think that was in December, and my birthday was in January. So I only had to wait till January to be 17. And I told my mother I wasn't going back to school. So that was even before Pearl Harbor started. I told her I wasn't going back to school.
Okay.
And I told her, told my mother that, excuse me, that went and got a job as a mail clerk at High Standard, which was making rifles for the Army. And when the war started, I didn't want to stay home.
What did you do at High Standard?
I was a mail clerk,
Okay, you told me that.
so I delivered the mail to the different departments and stuff. And then when I finally got my mother talked into signing for me,
How many times did you have to talk to your mom?
I had 2 or 3 conversations with her, and she finally decided that if I wasn't going to go back to school, I could go into service. So I did. And
Tell me about what you remember about the recruiter. Was it an Army, Navy? Like, what do you remember about going in there?
I went in the Navy because my cousin had been in the Navy before, and he was on submarines, and standing watches, his legs went bad, so they discharged him before the war even started. And then when the war started, they called him back in, and he was a machinist mate. So they were looking for guys to train people. So he did that, and then he stayed in and retired from the Navy. But I didn't, when I signed up for the Navy, they sent me to Newport. And I did my boot camp at Newport. And before we got out of Newport, they asked us what we wanted to do, what career we wanted to follow, and I just said, well, I'll be an airplane mechanic. So they sent me to Jacksonville, Florida, and I went to aviation machinist mate school. And when I got out of aviation machinist mate school, I volunteered for aerial gunnery school, which was another month and a half. And then when I left aerial gunnery school, we went to Alameda. They took us on a train and deposited us at the Alameda Air Station in California, where we went into a squadron. And then when the squadron was ready to go aboard ship, they bought the what we lovingly called the Kaiser coffin, the one torpedo job. When they came down, we went aboard ship and did night flying, and the pilots were taking instructions on how to land on that thing. And
So carrier landings.
yeah, you had to make they made carrier landings at Alta Mesa, which is in California. And all it was is a little strip of ground where they had a bunch of wires painted, and the pilots would come in, and the signal officer would give them all the directions with the wigwags. And if they missed the wires, they just said, well, you just went into the barrier, you crack your airplane up. But they finally got it pretty good.
Now I know when you got on the Anzio, you were assigned to a pilot, but
Right.
were you training with a pilot?
No,
No.
what they do is they when you go aboard ship, when we went aboard ship, they give us an option. We could join ship's company as a mechanic, or we could stay in the squadron. So I figured I'd just soon be on the ground. So I volunteered for ship's company, but I still got flight pay. They paid me extra money every month because I had an aerial gunner's experience, but I never fired at an enemy airplane.
Is that right?
Yeah, I made one carrier landing. That was all I wanted to make, because I was in a turret. And he coming in, you look down, and I asked the pilot, I said, "You gonna land on that matchbox?" And he says, "Yeah, I hope so." So I only made one carrier landing, and then transferred into the ship's company.
Now, when you do a carrier landing, the ship has to turn into the wind, right?
Right,
And then
they turn into the wind, and the destroyers, escorts go alongside and everything. In case the guy misses the plane, they can pick him up if he didn't drown first.
because you can't stop, right?
No, they just keep
Okay.
going. They keep going. They usually, if one went in to drink, one would stop and look for the pilot, and the rest of them would keep going.
And how did you find out you're going to be in the Pacific Theater versus the European? Like, how did you know what Europe?
I didn't know until they shipped us out of school. They said, "You're going to the Pacific Fleet." I thought maybe I'd stay in the Atlantic, but that's the way the Navy works. If you lived on the Atlantic Ocean, you went to the Pacific. If you lived on the Pacific, you went to the Atlantic.
Now I want to ask you this: do you think there's anything to that? They knew you were like German born. Would that have come into it at all, or not at all?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so, because everybody knew they knew I was only a little squirt, only 6 months old when I came over.
Right.
So I'm not German. I wasn't raised
Right.
Nazi or anything. The Angio was the first and only ship that I was on. And it was built up Farmington, Washington. Kaiser built it. But it only took one torpedo to sink it. Because we had the corregidor was in our group when we went down to when we left. And they stayed with us until it got sunk. And only took one torpedo to sink it. They said I was on the hangar deck when the torpedo hit the ship. And I wasn't supposed to leave my airplane. I was supposed to stay with it. But I went topside to see what the heck was going on. Because there's no windows on that thing. And all the hatches were closed. When I got to the flight deck, I said, "What happened?" Because I could hear the explosion. And the guy that I talked to, he says, "They just sunk the corregidor, one torpedo." Said the island went off, that hit just below the island. The island fell into the ocean. And everybody that was down in the sick bay, that's where the torpedo went in. It only took one to sink it.
Do you remember when that was?
Oh,
Have you been at sea for a long time, or was that?
well, that was in 43, I think, somewhere around there. But when we started out, the name of the ship was Coral Sea. And then before we went to Hawaii, they changed the name to Angio. It was after the Battle of Angio. Because at that time they named all them little jeep carriers after battles, land battles, not sea battles. Because they said they were going to take the Coral Sea and name it after one of the big ones that was coming out, four-star class carrier. But I stayed on that thing for 2 years, 7 months, and 32 to 22 days, something like that. I didn't get a leave until just before I got discharged. And I wouldn't have got discharged then. I came home on a 30-day leave and was supposed to report back to New York, Brooklyn Navy Yard for reassignment. When I went to Brooklyn Navy Yard, the guy was looking through my records, and he says to me, "You know, young man," he says, "too bad you signed up for the regular Navy. If you was a reservist, you could get discharged. You got enough points to get out." I told him, I says, "Hey, you better look again. I signed a piece of paper that said USNR. So he started looking and he found it down in the middle of the records. So he says, where'd you come in from? I said, I come in from New Haven. I lived in New Haven then. He said, well, he said, you can go back home. Come back in 3 days, be here. It was on Friday. He says, come back on Monday morning. We'll ship you up to Lido Beach. 3 days later, I got discharged.
Wow.
I was just over 21.
What did you do with all your money, your combat pay and stuff?
Uh,
How often did you get paid?
You got paid every month. They paid you every month, $21 a month. Didn't have to buy any clothes, and you didn't have to buy any food. All I bought was ice creams and cigarettes. That's it. Shipped the rest of the money home, what I had left.
To your mother? Or
Yeah.
when you were on the ship, I mean, was the Anzio ever fired on when you were?
Oh yeah, yeah. They
Tell me about what that's like. Do you remember the first time you got fired on?
They probably, if the Japanese had strafed the carrier deck, they could have killed everybody. Because everybody was standing up on the flight deck watching. Until the old man got on the horn and says, get to your battle station. But my battle station was up in the air. He was gone. He flew off. I had a pilot, Francis Bushman. I don't know if he's the one that was in the movies or an actor or made movies or something, but he was a lieutenant, and the first day that we were in action, he shot down 3 airplanes. So I used to polish his airplane for him. I didn't just wipe it, I waxed it. He says it goes faster if you wax it. I said, I'll wax it. But yeah, every time I'd be in the line for down at the ship store to buy ice cream or cigarettes or something, he'd go by and he says, what do you need? I tell him, you get it. Didn't cost me nothing.
Because he was an officer?
Yeah.
And that's why?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How many crew were on the plane?
I took care of the airplane. I started up every morning, run it, check the magnetos and everything, make sure everything was going good. Then they had guys that come in and put in all the ammunition in, or put all the bombs or whatever they were going to do. But I took care of the airplane. Where that airplane was, I was, except flying. We had...
was this a trainer, or what was the...
Well, we had those, what they call FM2s that were made by General Motors. It was the takeoff of the Wildcat, which is a 18-cylinder radial engine they had, but when FM2s were 9-cylinder, and they go just as fast.
What would typically be wrong with the plane?
You get maybe they get a spark plug or something, but never had too much trouble because we used to drain a gallon of gas out of the tank every day. If it sat overnight, you drain the gallon of gas out, make sure you get all the water out of it because all the water would settle to the bottom.
And was this carrier, did you have a below deck and an elevator, or were you...
They had two elevators, one forward and one aft. And they were hydraulic. But every time they go up or down, klaxon horn would sound so you wouldn't fall in.
And when the plane would move, would you move with the plane? You were there with the plane, like if it...
Mm-hmm.
But the work you were doing was probably under decks, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Down on the hangar deck.
Hangar deck.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah, you have to, what we had to do is they had crews that, when they put the wings up, to unfold them, I'd make sure they got the pins in, make sure they're locked. And then pull, before they could taxi up to the catapult, I had to pull the chocks out.
Okay.
I hooked them in a parachute, unhooked them when he got there.
This Francis Bushman, did he ever get attacked? Was he ever into stuff? Did he ever get shot at or anything? No.
Nope. We spent one Liberty, what they call Liberty, was on Mogmog Island. It was an old, an island out there in the middle of the Pacific somewhere, where the Army came in and they made a recreation camp. You could play ball, buy beer, get beer or ice cream. But that was the only Liberty we had. We didn't get it on any other ports.
How'd you deal with the heat and the? I mean, it must have been hotter than hell. And there's no air conditioning anywhere, was there?
It was pretty cool. They had the big fans that would blow on the in the hangar deck, because they only had two hatches by where the elevators were that they could blow air into. But they weren't too bad, except if you had the upper bunk, 6 high. Boom, 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 boom.
Where did you sleep?
I got the middle. Because if you got the lower one, everybody stepped on it to get to the upper ones. And they use it as a ladder to go up. But it wasn't too bad. I mean, the chow was good, got good food. No matter what happened, if it were under attack, they bring sandwiches.
While you're fighting?
Yeah, they bring sandwiches. Yeah.
Can you remember the first time that the ship was attacked when you were on it? Do you remember that day or?
Oh, it's been so damn long ago now that, of course, when you're just a teenager, you're not even 21. Everything is a big adventure, and it can't happen to me, you know. But when the old man says, I don't want to see anybody on the flight deck that don't belong there, I stayed away.
Yeah. Did you lose many friends in the war?
There was 3 guys that got killed before I even got in that I knew. They had enlisted right at after Pearl Harbor, and all 3 of them were on destroyers, and all 3 of them got killed.
Different ships or?
Different ships, yeah, but all 3 of them got killed.
U-boats or air?
Mostly U-boats. Yeah. And then when I remember that when the first hurricane we went through, I thought the ship was going to split in half because they have expansion seams. Well, they were about that far from the waterline before they stopped. They patched them up and put steel plates on them and welded them to keep the damn thing from falling apart.
Wow.
But I don't know. All in all, it's like that fellow that I talked to at the awards award. He was in Patton's army. He said he was fighting with Patton, and I told him that my mother's last husband was in the Army Transportation Corps, hauling gasoline and fuel oil, diesel oil. He was chasing Patton, trying to get him the fuel oil. He couldn't get to him. They run those tanks so damn far and fast that they're hard to catch up to him. He says because when they were going through Germany, the dive bombers would come strafe the roads, and they were after the tankers. So the first thing they do is they pull off the road somewhere and get away from that vehicle. He says they'd come up one side and they'd flop over and come back down again until the P-47s come along and chased them away.
I wanted to ask you about you lost 3 buddies before the.
Before the war started here.
And what made you still go Navy when the 3 guys you knew were already killed in the Navy?
Well, I think my cousin had a lot to do with that. He says if you join the Army, you don't know what you're going to get to eat. If you're in the Navy and you're on the ship, the food is there. You've got showers. You got a bed. You don't have to sleep on the ground. It's not that bad. Says you don't have to carry a pack because it's all in the locker. If you need it, it's there. Sometimes I wonder what had happened, what would have happened if I had stayed in. But of course, 30 days, the last 30 days I was home, I met Ellie the last 15 days.
Really?
My brother called me a drunk because I'd go to the bar every night because I didn't know where I was going to go, so I just go out and have a good time. And he says, "You're drinking too much." He says, "The little girl across the street from his girlfriend," he says, "got to get you a date." We went to a wrestling matches of all places.
Now, is this before you went in?
That's when I was home on a 30-day leave.
Okay.
Before I got discharged.
But you didn't know you were going to get discharged.
That's why, I thought I was going to go back aboard ship somewhere. I didn't know where, but I mean the war was still going on in Japan. And I figured I'd be going back that way. You never know.
So, what was the date of your discharge?
December 11th, 1945.
Man, what did you do? Like that first day, like when you knew you were no longer in the service, what did you?
When I got discharged, I went to Ellie's, or when I was going to get discharged, I had dropped Ellie off at school. I told her I'd write her. I came back that afternoon, she was just getting out of school. "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm going to get discharged in 3 days." Because when I left, I told her, I said, "I don't know where I'm going." They never say. You just report to Brooklyn Navy Yard for further assignment. But we started at the Gilbert Islands. When they first invaded the Gilbert Islands, that's our first action was down on the Marshall in the Gilbert Islands. And then we were in damn near every other one. A lot of times we were with the Fifth Fleet. We were the Fifth Fleet. The big ones were further away from us refueling, so we sent all our airplanes up and used their call letters. So if the Japanese were listening, they figured the Fifth Fleet's still out there, so we're not coming out. But that wasn't too bad a duty. They did a lot of night flying there in the end. Fly a lot at night.
Now, I remember talking to you one time. You said that there were a couple guys killed on the deck, the cable, or
They got there was a couple planes that come in that didn't make it. That hit the barrier and flip over. And I remember a couple of them. The catapults, when they shoot them off, there's a ring that they put in by the tail on like a piston that holds the tail down. Well, they were, I guess they were improperly installed or improperly made, because the guy would be revving up. So would pilot revving that up, and the signal officer would throw his flag down. That means he's going to get shot off, and he's waiting. So he puts his head back like this, up against the headrest, so he doesn't get banged. and that thing broke. The ring broke. Well, the airplane started moving a little bit, and then pretty soon the sling dropped off, and it goes like this is the deck. It just goes, boom. So we run him over. He run to the side of the ship, to whatever side catapult they were using, and looked down, which was dumb because they had live depth charges and stuff in it. Didn't know if they're going to blow it up or not.
Those guys probably just drowned, right? I mean, they just.
A lot of them got hit by the ship when they went over. But what I know now, I probably wouldn't have done it what I did to begin with. Use my head. See, my brother, Johnny, never finished school. He went in the Air Force. But when he came back, he took GDE courses, and he got a certificate for being in the Air Force. I didn't need it.
So now you're out of the service. You tell Ellie, hey, I don't have to go, I'm done. Then what happens?
I went to work for Armstrong Rubber Company, what they call a pan boy. I'd put all the parts for the tires that the tire maker put on these trays that he just pulled out, and they go on the drum. And the guy that I worked with was, he'd been there for all during the war. And when I first started, he says, I'm going to work your tail off. He says, I'm used to piecework. You had to make so many tires, and then you got piecework, you got more money. I says, whatever I'll keep up with it. Then when he put the tread on, I had to puncture the tread with an ice pick, so that when they put it in the mold and it bakes it, the steam could get out through the holes, and then it would close back up. But it made pretty good money.
You remember what you got paid?
Huh?
What did you get paid?
I got paid by the hour. I don't know, I thought I was making pretty good money because I was only making third-class petty officers, or second-class petty officers money when I got discharged. If I stayed in, I probably would have ended up like my cousin did and become chief. And because he says, when you get discharged, put in for a billet where they'll give you a Jeep and a car and a place to stay, and all you do is drive around the airfield, make sure nobody stealing anything. Oh, you're guard duty. But I couldn't see that.
Were you tempted to stay in the service at all, or did you want to get out?
It's like any other job you're doing day in and day out. I guess you get tired of it, and you want to try something new. But I stayed with the phone company longer than I stayed in the Navy.
All right, so you went to the rubber company. Then what was the next thing?
Truck drivers. I drove a tanker. I worked for Pacific and Lawson. We hauled fuel to Massachusetts every night, bunker fuel oil. And Ellie and I would have our Saturday night date. I'd drive to where I was going, dump the oil, and she'd drive home. Semi. She's a pretty good driver. She learned how to drive a semi. She couldn't back one up, but she could go straight, keep it on the road.
I'm sure the company didn't know she was driving.
Oh, no. See, when Louis got out of service, he had worked there before, so he went back driving. And when I got tired of being a carpenter, I started wanting to drive. So I drive at night, he drive during the day.
Okay.
I drove the truck that he had. but he was a stickler. He didn't want any spots on his tank, no oil spots, so he had to wipe everything off.
So how did you guys decide to leave to go to, you were going to California, right?
No, we were going to Oregon.
Okay, you're going to Oregon, so.
Yeah, after Ellie and I got married, Ellie's folks moved to Oregon. So we were going to go to Oregon. Yeah, place to go. Got tired of Connecticut. So we just come down the East Coast, went across the Gulf Coast, gonna go back up that way up to Grants Pass, Oregon. We got through, we stopped in Houston, Texas for 3 days, visited with the guy that was in the Navy that knew from the Navy. And then when we went through Chandler, here's all these big orange trees in the middle of town, and big cotton fields and alfalfa fields. And Ellie says, next little town we come to, why don't we stay and visit for a while? So we stopped. I went down Country Club Drive to Main Street, went down Main Street to Mesa Drive and pulled a U-turn with our house trailer. Pulled a U-turn, went back down to Country Club and parked it in the trailer park. Been here ever since.
You never made it to Oregon, huh?
Nope, well, we made it to Oregon about 6, 8 months later. We took a trip to Oregon. That was before we had any kids.
How'd the phone company come up? What was that deal?
I worked for a guy mixing plaster when I settled in Mesa, and then when
Were you building homes or something? Or?
he was building houses and drywall and then plastering. Well, I would mix the plaster, but I had done mixing plaster in Connecticut for the kid that we went to Mesa with. His dad owned a construction company, and he was a plasterer, and I was a hod man. But they do it a little different in Arizona than we did. We mixed it in a big tub with a hole. They used a cement mixer. They mixed all their plaster and cement, and they colored it before they even put it on the wall. It was colored. So I got a job mixing plaster. You use the same size bottle for the color after you put in all your shovels of sand, and then you dump the plaster in. So many buckets of water, and then you throw the color in there, and then it would mix it all up. And luckily, it all come out the same color. But I did that for a while, and then when Johnny, they moved out. Norma and Johnny moved out, and he wanted to work for the phone company because Norma worked for the phone company. So we put in for Mountain Bell, and we both got hired the same day. But I was making more money mixing plaster than I did with the phone company. First couple of years.
What did you start doing with the phone company? What was your job? What were you doing?
A grunt. You dig ditches, set dig pole holes. If they're going to bury cable, they didn't use an auger to dig anything. They dig it up by hand. 2-foot trench, 4 or 5 feet deep. They throw in a 25 pair cable. Then they cover it up. 6 months later, you go back and dig it up, put in a 50 pair cable. They got taxed on everything that they had in the ground, used or unused. If they put in a 300 pair cable, they get taxed on a 300 pair cable. So they first I wouldn't have started in the 50s. It was put in the smallest one you want and come back later and change it.
What a waste.
It's a waste. Now everything is underground. They put in that pipe, and then they push rods through it with a wire on it, and wire hooks to the cable, and they pull the cable in, stop at the manhole and whack it off, go on with another one.
What do you think when you look back on your time in World War II? Like, what do you think about, how do you think it affected you as a person?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Because with my upbringing and everything, I wasn't that wild kid that ran around a lot. Because my mother would still pull my ears.
How do you think it, like, I mean, if you'd stayed home and not joined up, obviously that experience affected your life. I mean, what do you think the military did for you?
I think I learned how to follow orders and do what I was supposed to do and not be a wise ass. There's so many of them now that they go into service, they think they own it. It don't work that way. You're the low man on the totem pole, no matter how many years you got in. There's always someone that's got more time than you that knows what's going on and knows what you're supposed to be doing. And if you do it right, they'll pat you on the back. If not, they'll kick your butt.
Who were your buddies in service, and did you keep up with them, and where were they from?
Most of them ended up that I was on board ship were from California. And I haven't heard from hardly any of them. Of course, they were all, I was the younger of the bunch, and they were all, there was a couple of them that were married, a couple of them, bunch of them that were specialists, like the guy that took care of all the instruments. He worked for the instrument company during the war, or before the war, so he knew how to fix them all. And then he had guys that worked for Bendix, the brake tire guys that worked tires. So being a plane captain, all you had to do was check. You had a check sheet. You checked everything, and if something had to be fixed, you take it down to the engineering shop, and they say, bring her on down, and they change it. That's the best job there was. All you did was wipe the windshield and strap them in and unstrap them and polish the airplane. Make sure the thing started in the morning. You hated it when your cartridge starter didn't work. You'd fire a shot and it wouldn't. He either didn't give it enough gas, or you go. And the old man would be up there. All right, number 74, get that thing running. Because he just sat up there on his little flying bridge and looked down and could see everybody.
That's funny. So the cartridge was an explosive, right?
It's like a shotgun shell. They stick it in, and when he fires it off, it kicks it over. Otherwise, you had to sit there and crank it. You wind up that inertia starter, and when he got ready, you'd pull the string, and it'd engage it, then it turned the engine. The old trainers, we did that, used to have to sit out there and wind it up.
It's like a recoil, huh? Spring-loaded recoil?
Yeah, it's like a spinning top. The faster you get it, the tighter you get it, the faster it will spin. And then they come out with the cartridge starter, you just put the shell in. And
Did you spend time on any other islands or get off the ship occasionally, or what do you remember about where you went?
we didn't get much liberty except Pearl Harbor.
What was that like, going to Pearl? After, I mean, there must have been all kinds of evidence of the attack.
Yeah, it was, but I don't know. Pearl Harbor was a Navy town. A lot of prostitutes from the States come over, made their fortune, and went back home.
A lot of beer halls and stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Pearl Harbor it's a fast town, like all the big Navy towns there. But I wasn't old enough to buy liquor or anything because I wasn't 21 until I got discharged.
So you probably smoked a lot, huh?
Yeah, 50 cents a carton. I tried chewing one time. I'll never chew again. You just go to spit, and the airplane would rev up, and the guy behind you would get it. Or somebody in front of you would spit, and you get it.
And Hershey's, you get a Hershey bar, right?
Oh, yeah.
Coke?
They had all the soft drinks and stuff, and a lot of ghee dunks.
Ghee dunks?
That's the candy.
Okay. Ghee dunks?
Yeah, ghee dunks.
I've never heard that. Is that a Navy term?
Yeah.
What's it mean?
Just being sweets, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, I've never heard that before. My dad talked about shit on a shingle and
Chip beef on toast.
chicken beef on toast.
Yeah.
What other meals do you remember?
We used to get a lot of powdered eggs, powdered milk. Made their own ice cream though,
Really?
with powdered milk. They made ice cream with it. So we always used to trade, send them over to the destroyer escorts.
Because they wouldn't have any ice cream.
No. They were the,
How many men were on board that Anzio?
there was one full squadron. I don't know, much 100 and some guys, I guess, in the squadron. They had a torpedo squadron and a fighter squadron.
How many planes?
Uh, 15 or 20 fighters, I think, and about almost the same number of torpedo bombers.
Oh,
No.
so 40 planes per?
Yeah.
And were the torpedo bombers, they were longer range, right? Were they, or no? The fighters were short range, right?
The fighters were short, and the torpedo bombers were long.
But, but the torpedo bombers could go up and stay up longer, right?
Yeah, because they carried more gas. Yeah.
How long could a fighter stay up?
Oh, they'd be up 3 or 4 hours. Yeah, they're burning that 100 octane gasoline.
How many gallons of fuel would the wings hold?
I don't know. It's quite a bit. So
Okay,
the
yeah,
tanks are in the wind.
I bet.
So on the torpedo bombers, the tanks were between the pilot and the gunner, but they all had armor plate on them.
Right. Did you ever get in trouble on the ship?
I got drunk one time before they carried me aboard ship on Mogmog Island. I think I had 4 beers sitting underneath a palm tree with nothing on the top, hotter than hell. I traded all my ice cream tickets for beer tickets, and I don't think I used them all. But I vaguely remember being carried back aboard ship And the officer of the deck said, what happened to him? And the guy that carried me up said, it's too much sun. And the officer kind of snickered. You mean it's too much brew? Yeah, a little bit of that too.
Wow, you must have been sunburned too, I bet.
Oh yeah.
That's funny. Wow.
Yeah. It gets hot down there in them islands.
Well, today's Memorial Day.
Yep. Been a long time.
What do you think about when you on Memorial Day? Who do you think about?
I think about the poor guys that didn't have a shot. I mean, they got caught with their pants down, weren't prepared. Especially those poor guys that were playing ball alongside their ship and couldn't get back onto the ship because they were being shot at. They caught them with their pants down.
You talking about Pearl?
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of nurses and everything.
Yeah. What irked me mostly, I think, is they kept talking about that Japanese guy that was giving his reply to Roosevelt, and he typing with one finger. He was real late getting it there because it had already done damage when he. It's a wonder they didn't shoot him right there.
Yeah. How do you feel about the Japanese today?
I think a lot of it was their culture. They were the samurai saw a soldier, and people had screwy ideas.
Yeah.
I'm 91 and a half
91 and a half.
because the 14th of June was my birthday, or my birthday's in January. January, February, March, April, May, June. 6 months.
You got any advice for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and stuff?
Behave themselves. There's a kid that is Ray and Pauline's grandson. He went in the Navy, and when he went in the Navy, he had gotten picked up underage drinking, so they put him back 6 months. So he asked me for a little advice, and I wrote him a letter and told him, I says, when you go in the Navy, if the guy says jump, you say how high. If he says run fast, how fast. You follow orders. Don't give anybody any sass, because they like to ride you. If you give them sass, they'll be on you all the time. They're going to show you who's boss. You just follow orders and do the best you can and keep your nose clean. That's what I told all my kids. Keep your nose clean. I'm real proud of Eric. His guys, when we had the downturn and he lost his business, them guys were going to the damn place and charging it to him and never paying him. And he paid out for all his bills. He wouldn't file bankruptcy. I'm proud of him for that.
That's rare.
He's an honest guy. When Andy came home from college, he came back with a guy that his dad was going to build some houses in Arizona. Spec houses, I guess they were. So he got a contractor. So Andy told the kid, he said, have your dad call my brother. He's a plumber. He give you good work. So the guy calls him and he has him go bid on a couple jobs. So he bid one job and he turned it into the contractor. The contractor had the nerve to say, you're not charging enough. Eric says, I have my profit margin that I'm figuring in. I'm not hurting, but you're not making it look good for me.
Trying to gouge them. Yeah,
He wanted his cut.
yeah,
The higher he could get the bill,
sure,
the more he made.
right, right. Bad news.
So Eric called the guy and told him, he says, you better check on your contractor. I gave him my bid and he said it was too low.
Wow. Crazy.
So the guy checked on him and he got rid of him.
Yeah, I bet. Thanks for doing this for me, Fritz.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. You
Well,
did good.
It's I haven't really given too much thought about things like, since I've been married, I've had a good life. We have our ups and downs. We get through them, work things out. If she says jump, I say how far, how high.
Very good. Thanks, man. That's awesome. We're done.
I'm proud of all my kids, all 5 of them. They all made something for themselves. You know what I always tell everybody when Ellie comes to Arizona? I says, the core of the family just arrived. What do you mean? I says, when little Ellie comes to Arizona, we don't get to see her because everybody else wants her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Well, good deal. Thanks, Fritz.
Yeah, well,
I appreciate it.
okie doke. Hope it comes out all right.
Oh,
Sounds
yeah.
okay.